Hey, familia y amigos, welcome back to another episode of Teachable Moments with Jay and Maestro, founder of Don't Limit Your Identity Foundation. I am very excited today because I have a special guest who is a founder of National Hispanic Suicide Prevention Network. Her name is Gabi Vargas. I'm excited for you to hear her story, be able to find resources available to anyone that you happen to know. Let's get this meeting started because I know that what you're going to find out from today from Gabi, it's definitely something that you're going to find very, very helpful. With that, Gabi, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
morning on this beautiful Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm
Yes.
excited. I'm happy you said yes to be able to come out. I know that we met a few years ago, and when we met, we immediately connected, and then we were able to connect at one point to be able to provide a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club, which was amazing. Allow me to be able to see the artistic side of you and how you help our youth and many out there when it comes to leveraging art as a way to express one's self. So with that, I want to start off, Gabi, with just you taking a moment to just share whatever you like from your upbringing and how it led to where you are today.
Yeah, no, thank you. And here we are starting 2025, the new year, right? Full of new opportunities. And I just felt like your offer was very genuine. You know, I always love to share the awareness of what I do for the community and just hopefully touch the hearts of people that may be struggling, just like I was when I was younger. My story actually begins in Zacatecas, Mexico. That's where I was born to two very young parents. My mom was 19, my dad was 22 years old. And so eventually they brought us to the United States when I was a young girl. And I grew up in a very a traditional household with the mentality of Mexico. And, here I am being raised in a country that is unknown to my parents. So I feel like my identity, when I hear the word identity, it's like I have two different identities sometimes when it comes to my culture. But I grew up in Palatine. We immigrated to Palatine, a suburb close to Chicago. And I have two sisters and a younger brother and parents that were very faith-based. We grew up
Yes.
in church, in a Christian Pentecostal church.
Okay.
I grew up in a family that obviously provided a lot of things for us when it came to support and just surviving themselves as new immigrants in this country. So growing up in that area, I get to see and work with youth that maybe can connect with me in that sense of like I don't know who I am or what is my identity, right? So when you shared about your podcast, I'm like, I'd love to share my story and hopefully inspire youth to know that their identity is what they create. And ultimately with my art studio, it's that you're a beautiful masterpiece and you get to recreate your life
Powerful.
and change the narrative if there's a narrative that needs to be changed.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right when you touched on the identities and having two identities because I could relate to that. My parents also were young parents. My father was 20 and my mom was actually 17, and they met in Puerto Rico and then came here. And even like recently, I was talking to someone. I said, "So how was Christmas?" And he's also from Puerto Rico. He said, "Well, Christmas is not the same out here, and it's just a culture difference." And it's very true to that. And I love what you shared about the masterpiece when it comes to the art, and if someone has to change that narrative. Allow me to ask, how did you connect art to that? Which, I mean, many could probably see as to why, but I'd love to hear your story on it.
Sure. I feel like we're all artists,
Yes.
in some kind of way. I grew up in church. One of the artistic parts of me was music. I love music. I used to play the drum set in my youth group.
Okay.
So it was always like a form of expression for me. And as the years went by, I started working at a hospital as a medical interpreter. And I was struggling. I left my house very young at 18 years old. I had a baby my senior year of high school. And I left my house at 18 and kind of ventured into an unknown world and fell into a profession working at the hospital. And in that time, I had my own struggles and I really never had anyone to share with me about how my life could be better. I never really had a mentor. And so years down the line, I lost my friend to suicide in
I'm
2012.
sorry.
And actually, that week we were having a conversation. So after he took his life, I felt like that remorse, like could I have been a better friend or said something, or did he reach out because he needed some support and I didn't ask. So that was the first time that I was touched by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And, never would have imagined that 5 years down the line, my 18-year-old cousin would have taken his life. My cousin was 18 years old, very young.
Okay.
And ultimately, that led for me to get professional help. I had attempted to take my life, or had a plan to take my life with my two children, as I was very young, going through a divorce. And um, I went to started going to therapy. I was really struggling, and that's one of the parts that I want to share with people about how you may see people in your work, at church, in your family. You might notice that they're struggling, or you might not. They might be just walking around with a smile, pretending really, right, covering the what's really inside, that everything's all right. And so I did that for many, many years, even working in the hospital as a professional. We always get told, like, your client or your patient comes first. So you live with that mentality that I can't be authentic about what I'm feeling, right?
Yes.
Especially, me leaving my house at such a young age, as a young mom, unwed. It was always like, I can't be honest about what I'm going through because I'm shameful. I feel judged. I don't feel like the people around me can understand. And so, going back to what you were saying, my therapist, that I finally was able to connect with a therapist, thanks to a stranger who shared with me her personal story, and she gave me a business card. And I carried this business card for this therapist for a few weeks, and I kept convincing myself that I didn't need help, that que no estoy loca, that I'm not crazy, that everything's gonna be all right, and that there's nothing wrong with me. And then, at the same time, reflecting on the loss of my cousin. He was so young, 18.
Yeah.
You think he had everything. What could he have possibly have that wouldn't allow him to see life in a different way, right?
Right.
But I went ultimately started going to therapy. I didn't want my family to go through what we're already going through. I got to see how painful and how it kind of broke our family apart instead of bringing us together in some sort of way. So I go to therapy. I'm doing so much better. I feel like she's an angel that God sent to my life. And she told me, you need to start looking for different vessels or different things that can give you support when you want to do the things that you used to do to cope, right? So, like drinking, doing drugs, or falling into unhealthy relationships, being self-destructive. Instead of doing that, what can you do? So I started volunteering.
Okay.
She's like, look for something to volunteer in your community. And that led to me um, creating a community walk at Sherman Hospital,
Okay.
just for awareness and in honor of my cousin. And from there, people started sharing their stories with me. Like, I lost my brother, I lost my husband. Even within my department, our interpreting department, my coworkers shared for the first time with all of us, like, hey, I lost my brother, I lost my sister. It was very impactful to see that people had a story connected to suicide, and that I wasn't the only one. And so I remember Jim, a volunteer, came over. He's like, hey, I see the work that you're doing. I'm an art instructor. If there's ever anything I can do to support your mission, let me know. I was doing nothing with art. And then soon enough, this lady that worked in the hospital lost her 20-year-old son, Jordan, to suicide.
Wow.
Who, I believe that a lot of times people that are survivors lose someone to suicide. They don't know how to share the story because of the stigma. So she came to me and said, hey, I know the work that you're doing. I lost my son. I would love to share his story. And I always like to focus not on so much the way they ended their life, but who were they before they did.
Mm.
And so I told her, tell me more about Jordan. And she said he was an artist. So then I reached out to Jim and I said, hey, Jim, I have something to work on with you. I'm like, this lady wants to share her son's story. He was an artist. What if we do like a painting event? And so we did. That was our first connection to art. We did a grief support event with painting, and that led for me to also see my artistic talent,
Okay.
not just music, but opening up the story. And people loved it. People expressed what they're feeling without even noticing when it comes to art. And it's
Okay.
very therapeutic. So from there, I was like, oh, I want to open an art studio. And I was reading a book. I can't remember the name of the book now, but it said that we are God's poema. We are God's
Mm.
beautiful masterpiece. And so I named it that, Poema Studio. And art is beautiful. And I tell people all the time, especially youth, no matter what you've been through, like no matter what your life has looked like, every artist, some artists take months and years to complete a piece of art. So that could be you, you know, how can you repaint this art? How can you repaint your life and make it look different?
I love that. That's so powerful.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
long story.
No, it's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing it. And number one, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for seeking the help. I know I myself at one point faced that battle. I definitely
Yeah.
had suicidal thoughts, and like you shared, like sometimes we think, "Oh, am I crazy?" And it's wild that that comes to mind to many.
Yeah.
And you took the initiative to seek help, and through that, it led that domino effect where now you're doing one volunteer work and now you led into art and then you tied art into this and then that masterpiece.
Yes.
So that's beautiful, and I appreciate you taking the time to share that story is how it led to that.
Led
But
to
more importantly, thank you for taking that step, because now today you're here.
Yes.
You're here to speak on that. And there's many out there that probably had the thought of seeking that therapist but unfortunately didn't take that step, and you did. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I feel like a lot of us, even if, you know, you may notice, like I said, someone's struggling, that it's that, how do I start the conversation? How do I reach out to them without them feeling maybe offended?
Right.
And I'm really grateful for Liz. She did that. She came over, shared her personal story, and it made me see that I wasn't the only one. You know, and that's why I love what you're doing, sharing people's stories, because sometimes we do feel alone in our feelings.
Absolutely.
You know, growing up in church, and I have a great relationship with God now. I think that a lot of times we were taught that if you were struggling, it was because you weren't close enough to Him, or you were in sin, or what are you doing wrong? Are you not praying enough? Is this why you feel this way? So for me, it was that breakthrough, because actually this group was at a women's Bible study.
Okay.
And so I think that is important to tell people, remind people that, you know, sometimes the conversation you may have with someone can just be a genuine conversation about your story, and that may change someone's perspective to get help. And so for me, it was seeing this woman that on the outside she looks like she's got it all together, and she's like, no, I've been through what you've been through, and here's someone that can help you. You know, so there's a quote that I love. It's called, it says, education of the mind without education of the heart is no education at all.
Wow.
And so I feel like Liz did that for me first. She touched my heart first, and then it helped me to be more open about getting professional help. But yeah, sometimes we want to, like, you know, give people all these resources and education without meeting their heart. Like, where are you? Like, who hasn't touched in that space?
That's great. I never looked at it from that point of view. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I find myself being that person where I have such a serving heart. I definitely always want to help. And if I hear someone tell me like the battle they're going through, I want to be able to like provide solutions immediately.
Yes.
So this is why I'm glad you're here today, because
Yeah.
as I was sharing with you, don't limit your identity foundation, you know, the story behind it, how it started, how I felt that, you know, me creating the Word of Day videos for my daughter led to it becoming a ministry, and it allowed men to connect with me. And you know this, men battle to be vocal, to share what's going on, because this whole machismo, this pride, this thing of, oh, if I say this is a sign of weakness, and but these guys felt comfortable enough, and I give all the glory to God. God used me for us to connect, but it really was Him. And I told myself recently, I'm like, I have to get Gabi on our show, because I want her to speak on things that you're sharing right now that I didn't know. I wanted to be the problem solver, and you're telling me, hey, the heart.
The heart.
The heart.
Yeah.
So yes.
Before people can actually accept even God's love in their life, I think they need to see that human love, right?
Yes.
There was a point in my life, even growing up, my dad was a pastor at one point.
Oh wow.
Growing up, just being so resentful towards God, towards church people. Like, I wanted nothing to do with God, and I wanted nothing to do with people that judged me based on that belief. And so I feel like God was very intentional with how He wanted to heal my heart, because He sent people, right? There's no way that in that moment of my life, I was going to be open to God's change or love if the people that I was seeing face to face were making me feel hurt or unnoticed, right? So
Right.
I feel like if we can show our love, there's a beautiful song that I always listen to, and it says, let me show your love through my eyes so people can see it, right?
Love that.
And then you can lead people into getting professional help and support. Especially a lot of youth that have attempted go through a very difficult experience with the system, right? They don't want to trust adults. They don't want to trust professionals. So I feel like a lot of us have that opportunity to just listen to people's heart without even realizing I don't have to be a professional. I don't have to be a psychologist. Sometimes people just want to be heard without being judged. So, yeah, it started
Yes.
with someone that didn't judge me and just listened to me.
Created that safe place. It made you feel
Yes.
like, hey, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And that's definitely something that I want to lead more with. And
Yeah.
I try my best, and I hope that, I mean, it's worked. I feel in some ways because some have felt comfortable enough to say,
Yeah.
hey, I need to speak to you. I need to
Yeah.
talk to you. And,
Yes.
I've prayed on them. I've met with them, and I share with you. I bought each of them the purpose, the book, The Purpose Driven Life by Rick
Mm-hmm.
Warren, and it's blessed them. But I want more, and this is
Yes.
why I'm like, I need Gabi. I
Yeah.
need Gabi.
No,
So
well, thank you. Um, there was a point in my life too where I feel like I had all the resources, but I wasn't in that mindset to get it, right?
yeah,
To be able to make that phone call. I work with a lot of parents and I always, they come and tell me, hey, te traigo a mi hija porque ella tiene problemas. I bring my daughter to you because she's got problems.
mm,
She's being rebellious or whatnot. And I'm always like, are you listening to her? Like, what is
yeah,
she telling you? And most of the time, it's not even conversational. It's their behavior. It's the things they post on social media,
mm,
the way they act with you. And it's like, are you willing to listen?
right.
For parents, it's very difficult to realize that it's their environment that they're creating that is making your son or daughter struggle. We are a product of our environment.
So true. So true. That's one thing that even this week I listened to this podcast with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Daniel Amen. I'm not sure if
Mm-hmm.
you've heard of him.
Yes, I have.
I mean,
Yes.
he's phenomenal with studying the brain and
Mm-hmm.
understanding. And,
Yes.
he touches on that. And he's like, it's instead of immediately leading to just providing medication, listen,
Yeah.
talk to
Listen.
them, scan the brain. Then from there,
Mm-hmm.
identify what the brain health may be in, and then
Yeah.
from there you could treat it on.
Yeah.
You don't have to do all these medication which trigger other things,
Exactly.
especially suicide. We see that
Yes.
all the time on the fine print. You're like, I'm
Yeah.
trying to get better, but this is even increasing the thought behind it. So
Hmm.
I love
It's
that
not
you
like
touched on
a
that.
magic pill either. I
Right.
tell people that I work with, you have to go and release what you've been holding in. I am a suicide grief support specialist, so I help families that have lost someone to suicide. And I get to hear that story up to the last minute of whomever this person talked to or the last thing that they did. And going back into those stories, really what I can share with, your audience is the signs are there. The signs are there. We just don't know how to start the conversation sometimes. And
Mm.
so absolutely, I think we all have the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life when we just look from the outside, but at the same time you tell me how you feel and I'm willing to listen without expecting a solution,
Yeah.
you know.
And you mentioned the signs are there, and um, I'm glad you touched on that because recently, my cousin Christopher, he's my first cousin, my aunt Elena's son. He had a childhood friend, amazing young man. Seen him as a kid grow up, and sadly a few months back he took his life.
Sorry.
And thank you.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen each other in a while. But everything I remember of him, he had such a loving heart,
Mm-hmm.
always happy. He was really big into animals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And now as a young man, he's in real estate, but he's in another state or was in another state. And he reached out to me and he's like, hey, I see you're doing real estate as well. And maybe we could help our clients out if I have anyone looking to buy in Illinois. But when I found the news that he took his life, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
was that him reaching out? And maybe I could have just said, hey, why don't we get on the phone?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and some people hide it well. Like,
Yeah.
for example, let's think of Robin Williams. Never think that he is such a guy that loved making people laugh and
Yeah.
just lead with. But many people in that situation are trying to make others really, really
Yeah.
happy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, have some of those dark thoughts. So,
Yes.
can you speak a
Yes.
little bit more on the signs? Like, what are some
Yeah.
common signs that we can, if any,
Yeah. Well,
see?
you're allowing me to share my story even from as a child, right?
Yes.
I remember as a young girl, like not knowing English in school, the anxiety I had to go to school.
Wow.
And I used to pull my hair from like on the side of my roots. Mi mamá me regañaba. She'd be like, no estás haciendo eso. Don't be doing that. Don't be pulling your hair. Why are you pulling your hair? But now I know I struggled with anxiety as a child. Not knowing English, going to school, like nobody speaks my language. Even getting yelled at by teachers, and I have no idea what I did. So thinking back on my life, right, I struggled with that. My parents were obviously very young. They're immigrants. They're surviving. So I don't know if they knew about those signs, and I
Yeah.
work with parents all the time, and I'm like, that stomach ache might not be just that they're not eating or they're eating the wrong thing. They might be struggling with anxiety.
Wow, that's a good point.
I'm a youth mental health first aid instructor. I teach the community about the signs and symptoms. And so a lot of signs get masked by other physical things.
Mm,
So as a child, I struggled with that, with my anxiety. And then as I progressed and got older, I remember honestly my high school, I was the most like depressed high schooler ever,
mm,
right? I went through bulimia, anorexia, just things that were obvious like cause of it, like I need help, right?
yeah.
And I share with you this very important and impactful moment of my life when my parents took me to my counselor my junior year of high school, and they didn't speak English, and my mom tells me, dile que venimos porque necesitas ayuda. Tell the counselor that we're here because you need help.
Mm,
And my counselor isn't she tells me, what's your ID number? Looks me up in my ID number. And she tells me, tell your parents that you're in this country when you turn 18, you are no longer their problem. Now you are responsible for yourself and you are about to be 18 years old. And that was her
wow.
response to, hey, we're here to get help. And my parents know I love them. If they ever see this, they know I love them. But we learned from our life, right? And my parents, they're like, hey, nosotros te llevamos a buscar ayuda. We took you to get help. And that's what the counselor, the professional said. And so that, right, that opportunity for that counselor to actually have said, what's going on? What are you struggling with? And I feel like that was a missed opportunity for me so
Yeah.
young. So the signs, right? I tell parents, look at the way they are connecting with you, right? Do you get to sit down and have dinner with them and talk to them about what's going on in their life? Great, right? The way that they are maybe isolating themselves from their friends and loved ones. I know during the adolescent age, it's very complicated because sometimes things are just part of that stage, right? Like your
Right.
son and daughter, as they get older, they might just want to hang out on their own. They don't want to hang out with you so much.
Right.
But are they not no longer hanging out with you, not with their friends, and are they in their bedroom all the time? Right? Those signs.
Yes.
I read an article not too long ago, and the title was "We Are Losing Our Children in Their Own Bedrooms."
Wow.
You know, you think your son and
Yeah.
daughter are okay. You think that they're connected because they have all these followers and all these people they're connected with on social media, but are they really connected?
That's a
Are
good
you
point.
able to see the signs and symptoms?
That's a really good point. And I like that you shared that as far as I said, wow, was my initial reaction because even at one point, um, right around this time last year, my wife and I asked our son, "Hey, is in school about to start? He's a
Mm-hmm.
freshman in college," and he said, "Well, about that." And when he led to share his next steps and so on, he's like, "Did you guys notice anything?" And I'm like, "No. What was different?" Because he was always, I'm accustomed to him being in his room and playing his games and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see any of the signs, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't separate that.
Yeah.
So for me, the takeaway was, and I still need to get better at that, is just checking in. Like, hey,
Yeah.
things look normal on my end, but
Yeah.
are things okay? Is
Yeah.
there anything you need to talk to me about?
Yeah, that's one thing I learned from a family therapist that I went to. She said, you can't always have dinner with your kids every day, also as they get older, schedules and events and sports and all that. But try to have a couple of days a week that you have dinner with your kids. Talk to them how it's going. You notice more if they're in front of you. And so even after COVID, kids were in their bedrooms, everybody's doing virtual, all of
Right.
that. I think it made us feel like being away from each other is normal, right?
Yeah.
And so you talk about the signs and symptoms. When I was struggling even in the hospital, like I said to you, I knew that my role was to be a service to the community, an interpreter. I'm there to help you. It's not about me, but I had all the signs. And even one of them, I was going through a divorce, right? I don't think I have to tell you that I'm struggling when a divorce can't be easy on anyone, right? So
Right.
are you noticing changes in someone's life, like college, or your son is going from middle school to high school. That's a huge change. I don't need to ask you if that's going to be challenging. I know it's going to be challenging. So, are they going through something in their life, like a divorce, even moving? Moving, they say a child that moves from school to school struggles.
Yes,
So
I've seen
check
that.
in on those things, right? So for me, it was, I was going through a divorce amongst unresolved trauma that I had been carrying as an adult. But there were also other signs. I lost a lot of weight,
Hmm.
and people would actually tell me, "You look great. Oh my goodness, you lost a lot of weight. You look great." But on the inside, I was struggling, and I
Wow.
wanted someone to just ask me like, "Are you okay? Like, how is it going?" I was working night shift. I was a very young mom. Like, I didn't really have anyone to check in on me to say, ¿Cómo te sientes? ¿Andas cansada? Like,
Yeah.
working night shift, that's a big factor. I rarely ever slept. So, those things, if you want to check in on someone, you don't always have to know the signs. It's just check in on their life. How are you going? How are
Powerful.
you doing? Anything you want to share with me? I think it matters when you just can just be vulnerable with people.
Appreciate that. And you shared a couple questions just now with that. And I'm thinking to myself as I hear you, are there questions that we shouldn't ask that may be a trigger or a way to make them feel judged? Is there anything in line with that you could share?
Yeah, when I teach my class, I always bring up this tip. Um, when someone is doing something that is not right or self harm, like cutting yourself, right?
Hmm.
I'm gonna come to you and ask you, why are you cutting yourself? Because I want to know, right? I want to
Yeah.
help you. I care about you. But that question, why, can be can make someone feel defensive, can make someone feel judged. So I tell parents, ask this instead. What makes you cut yourself?
Powerful.
What makes you drink so much? What makes you miss school? So changing the why to what leaves an open conversation. Well, when I
Okay.
cut myself, I feel better about what's going on in my life. Or when I cut myself, I feel like I'm in control of my feelings. So that's a small tip, but I think it's meaningful. What's making you feel this way?
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Thank
So
you.
there's one.
I already parked that one in. I'm like, I'm going to save that
Yes,
because,
yes. The why
again,
to what?
the why to what. And
Yes.
so remember that. Remember
Yes.
that. The
Remember the
why
why
to
to what?
what. Thank you
Yes.
for sharing that, Gabby.
Yeah.
I know that you said you work nights, and I think in your previous experience, you've encountered some unfortunate family burdens and things like that that have
Hmm.
happened. And I don't even know if that's the right choice of word, but is there any story that touches your heart that you remember that you'd like to share with the viewers of anything you encountered through whether your previous work or what you're doing today?
In regards to this topic,
Yes.
yeah. Well, actually, recently, I felt a little bit of the burnout. The organization was founded just 2 years ago. I was doing a lot, running everywhere and networking events and, all these things. But I felt like I needed a little bit of a break. And just as I'm about to take this break, I was reached out to by or connected with a family that lost the youngest brother of 10 siblings.
Wow.
And he took his life at the first week of July or then the last week of June. Left two daughters, a 23-year-old and a 12-year-old. But he left 10 siblings. And I started doing the grief support with them, meeting the sisters, the wife, obviously a very difficult situation, heartbreaking, I mean, to say
Yeah.
the least. But as I talked to them more about it, he was the oldest brother. They're coming to me to, I know, like, they're like, we want to know why he did this, what happened, all of that. So I'm talking to them. I always like to go back into, tell me about your life, tell me about your childhood, tell me about how this dynamic of a family has functioned and existed. Well, the oldest brother of the 10 actually had taken his life years prior, and the second to last attempted. He did survive, but he's a ward of the state in a mental health hospital. So
Okay.
it was impactful to see, hey, this is the third person in this family that's struggling. And that this time, unfortunately, he took his life. But it made me realize how so many times in our families we carry on these traumas,
Yeah.
these unspoken of things, right? In this case, the father was a struggling father that struggled with alcoholism, and there was domestic violence involved in this family. And now we're talking about, seven different families within this family, 7 different cultures even within them. And so I was sharing with you, I have a big passion for preventing suicide in male,
Mm.
more than likely because I have 2 sons, but
Yes.
seeing this family, I got to see, wow, like how men are not able to express themselves. You know, um, the person that took his life recently, he had a lot of unresolved trauma, a lot of things that have been passed on to him.
Okay.
And so this, I've been working with them since July. Uh, as you can imagine, so many different families members, each has their own perspective of what happened. But me as an outside person, what I'm seeing is we need to be able as a family to say, whatever happened here doesn't have to continue happening. I know
Mm.
that for us as parents, it's hard to sometimes accept that we have created an environment that has been unhealthy, but it's just things that have been passed on to us. So I think
Yes.
it takes. I think I've done that, and I continue doing that within at least my small little family. Is I want to change those patterns, those beliefs that make us feel like we can't be open. I have 2 sons, and I always tell them, you can cry. Doesn't make you less of a man. Talk to me. How are you feeling? I'm very expressive as to, I tell them I love you. I hug them, and they're the same way. And within this family, I heard things like, my dad never said I love you to me. And my dad would hit my mother in front of everyone, and nobody said anything. So those patterns that get passed on,
Right.
I do feel like God put me in the life of this family to change that, that cycle, to change that. I call it chains sometimes, those chains that we're carrying on,
Yeah.
and we're not able to say, hey, this isn't normal. And I think it takes also to look on the outside, right? I feel like some things that I lived through that now I think are not okay, we felt as normal. We
Right.
didn't know anything differently.
Yeah, it's sometimes the things that, because you find yourself like, I've heard people say, well, I don't want to be like my parents when I grow up, and then they become exactly them. But it's things that you've caught, that you've learned, and
Mm-hmm.
not realizing it still continues to go
Yes.
pass on, and like you said, break those chains,
Those
and start
chains.
new family cultures. And I love that you
Yes.
share that with your sons. You let them know, hey, it's okay to cry,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it happens a lot in the Hispanic culture that we tend to, many cultures as well, is just a male thing. Like, hey, men don't cry. Well, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Cry, let it out. Don't
Yeah.
hold that in, because
Uh-huh.
that's where all these other thoughts come into play, because you're
Yes.
just holding it all in.
Hold it
And it
in.
continues to build and build and build to a point
Yeah.
where you just can't take it anymore. It's
Yeah.
like that bomb, ticking bomb.
Yeah.
Boom. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the case.
We were all born crying, so unless you
Yeah,
didn't cry when you were born, you don't get to cry.
that's a good
Pero
point.
todos
Yeah,
nacimos llorando.
that's
So
true.
I feel like it's an unfortunate way to build men up.
Yeah.
You got to be the strong one, and most of the suicide grief support I've given to families, most of them have been male, between 13 to 19 years old.
Wow.
And what I see, the pattern I see is, he was struggling with something. It was so difficult, but this was the way out. And I think it's coming to someone and saying, hey, I'm struggling. I'm
Yeah.
not as strong as you think I should be. We have fathers with this machismo of, tienes que ser hombre,
See.
right? Los hombres no lloran.
See.
Aguántate. So men grow up believing like they gotta be the strong person, which I think they do. I think they're leaders, but how are we supporting our leaders? How are we
Yeah.
able to meet them where they're at when they're struggling with a decision or a situation? Because
Right.
again, I think ultimately at the end of the day, we're all healing that inner child we've been carrying.
Very true. Very true. And as a leader, you want to have a clear mindset. And if you're not being expressive, whether it be through letting out those tears or sharing what's going on with
Mm-hmm.
someone else, how do you provide that clarity mindset? You can't. It's
Exactly.
clouded. It's
It's clouded.
yeah. So
Especially a lot of, young men that unfortunately don't have their father in their lives or had that good role model of a father. I think it can be difficult, right? Because
yeah.
now we're expecting these young men who later become husbands to be supportive, loving husbands, yet they never had that,
Right.
right? So it's, I think, being emotionally available means I let you be emotional too.
Yeah.
Like, how can I support your feelings without you feeling judged by the way you feel? So yeah, with my sons, I'm always like, advocating for them, and um, close to 9 out of 10 suicides are completed by men.
Wow.
It's a huge number.
That is a huge number. I didn't know that. So,
Yeah.
and I think, like, even for me, going back to thinking of like as a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
I shared with you, as you've been sharing with me, and I thank you, about the time I had suicidal thoughts. And
Yeah.
my thing was holding in all the problems I was facing. And at that
Yeah.
time was a financial situation within my
Yeah.
household. And I remember the day of, what kind of triggered more of the reason of like the push to want to pursue that as an option was witnessing my wife in tears, wondering how are we going to pay our next bill, and like we were already behind on our light and gas, and you know, so I remember leaving the house, and I'm like I couldn't answer that
Mm-hmm.
question, and
Yeah.
I'm in the garage and I'm sitting in my car and I have the car running and the door's shut, so I'm like, you know what, the best way to fix this problem is just taking my life. And the reason why I felt that was the solution is because I have life insurance. So I'm like, at this point, if I die today, my wife and kids will be okay financially.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was raised in church, a man of faith, um, God touched me. He stepped in. He's like, no, that's not the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And open that door now. We'll figure this out.
Yeah.
Your family needs you more than the financial side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you also touched on, I believe, was how God allows certain people in your life. And at that moment, my aunt Elena, going back to her, who I shared, my cousin Christopher's mom, she reached out to me about seeking help with from a church for the light and gas. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's programs out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that minute, I decided to just continue to live because God said, you know, you still serve a purpose. This is not the reason. This is not the way to fix anything you're facing. Trust in me. My aunt steps in
Mm-hmm.
with sharing what she needs. Now I'm asking, like, hey, how do I get that help? And
Mm-hmm.
she teaches me what I need to do. And by God's grace, those bills that my wife asked about
Mm-hmm.
got taken care of.
Yeah.
So God always provides. He's always faithful. I believe that every test that we face in life is just going to build that testimony for
Yeah.
people like you and I to share that story with anyone, whether it be through
Yeah.
podcasts or in person or whatnot,
Yeah.
to help them believe that, hey, no matter what, trust in God.
Yeah.
You know, you could still beat this. And then
Yeah.
God has people in place to help you, like
Yes.
Gabi within her nonprofit, and being able
Yeah.
to provide resource and figure out ways to not ask the why, but the what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are still some, areas of my life or parts of my story that I don't share so comfortably, right? I have had
Yes.
to heal those areas. But I think that when you have gone through something and you have the opportunity to share it with the right person, it might change their life. It might change the way they think about their identity. Here
Yeah.
I was very young with two sons. I already felt like I had made a mistake of starting my life that way. I have two kids with two different fathers, and that was a big insecurity for me.
Mm.
And I share that part because I know there's so many young women out there with that version of themselves that they feel like, what can I do? What is my purpose in this world if I already messed it up? If I'm
Wow.
already, my life has already been a mistake. So I felt like that. And I feel like God coming into my life and bringing the right people allowed me to see that although some parts of my life are embarrassing to share, those parts are the ones that I might help someone else. A young
Mm.
mom, a teen mom. I was 18 years old when I had my son. That's not something I wanted to share with everyone because people judge, right? So I feel like if we remember our purpose, right?
Yes.
Um, I tell people there's a toolbox, and in that toolbox there are tools, and each tool has a purpose. So God is not going to use someone that's never gone through something to help someone else. I mean, he might, yeah, he will, but he's going to be more intentional. He's going to grab the right tool for that situation. And
Wow.
that right tool might be you.
Mm.
Right? So for me is owning that story, owning that identity, owning that part of my story and saying I'm not limiting my purpose through what people say I am. Because if I had to share like just labels, right? I was unwed mom, I was all these labels that could have hindered me from doing what I do today. And it had to take people in my life to tell me everything's gonna be okay and you can move and be better from this. And now here I am today speaking to people that are questioning their life, are questioning like, do I even want to be here? And you were talking about the financial. For me as a young struggling mom, it's like I didn't want to share with you that I had no money. I didn't want to share with you that I was struggling because I already felt bad for being a young single mom without a husband, the way that society makes you feel like you should be.
Right.
But I was going through this divorce. I was kicked out of a bank account, so I was left in a very difficult situation, right? And so sometimes we come to our close ones, and they're like, "Oh, pues eso fue lo que escogiste. That's what you chose. So now deal with it, right?" And I think that for me, it's that feeling like I chose to get pregnant, right? And I say quote unquote because that wasn't the case, but I chose to get pregnant out es tu consecuencia. So deal with it. It's your consequence. So that it stopped me from asking for help. And I went to, I had $16 and then I'm like, okay, I'm crying. Like, Jason, like when I say I literally would clean my house. So when I did take my life, the paramedics wouldn't see my house looking like a mess, or my mom to say,
Mm.
"Mira cómo tenía de tirado. Look at all this mess." I would clean my house to prepare to take my life, to leave
Wow.
it looking as best as I could, right? So I got $16 in my pocket, and my ex was still paying the lifetime membership for the gym, and so I'm like, maybe going to Lifetime, I'll feel better. Let me go work out. Like some people say, oh, go work out. It'll make you feel better. It does help you, but sometimes that's not the appropriate advice. But I went to the gym and then I'm like, okay, on the way back, me llevé mis coras. I took all these coins that I had.
Mhm.
I'm like, on the way back, I'll stop by Jewel, cash the coins, buy groceries, and then we'll see about tomorrow. Well, my mind must have been in just the worst day ever. I went to the gym and I'm just crying and crying and crying at the gym. I'm like, okay, this is not the place to be. I go get my son. He was about 2 years old from the child care center. I walk out and I'm like, I go to Jewel, okay, trying to calm myself down. And I put the coins in there and I pressed the donate button.
Oh my goodness.
And that was it. That was like a moment where I felt like I was done with life. I can't do this anymore. And I remember going out to the parking lot and just like, actually, I'm surprised nobody asked if I was okay. I remember falling to the ground and just like screaming to God and saying, like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do this anymore. And so I had $16 in my pocket and I said, okay, we'll go to McDonald's and after we eat, I'm gonna end my life with my kids. And I'm like, God, I apologized for what I was about to do. And I said, me los voy a llevar conmigo porque a nadie le importamos. I'm gonna take them with me because nobody cares about us enough. Nobody cares about my kids enough like me. So si yo no puedo estar aquí, me los voy a llevar conmigo. So it would have been a murder suicide. And
Wow.
you're talking about how God speaks to you, and I know that you have to experience that to be able to know what that means. But I'm in the drive-through with my son. He was about 7 years old, and I'm crying, debating whether what I want to do is the right thing to do, whether I can handle life anymore. And my son's like, "Mom, are you crying because you're hungry? We're gonna get the food." And I was like, "Yeah, mijo, yeah, we're gonna get the food." And before so I'm thinking, like, I'm gonna do this, building up that courage to end our life together. And I drive away without the food. And my son stopped me and said, "Hey, Mom, you forgot the food." So I had to come back into the drive through, and that allowed me some time to rethink what I was about to do.
Wow.
And I heard a voice. Like I tell people, I know this might not be something you're accustomed to hearing, but I heard a voice, and God spoke in my ear and said, "Go to your uncle Bucho's house." And I don't even know how I got there. I didn't really go to my uncle's house that many times, but I drove to my uncle's house and I knocked on his door and he opened the door and I saw that like fear in his face, and he's like, "Mija, ¿qué tienes? Te vienen siguiendo." He's like, "Are someone chasing you? What's wrong?" He says, like after I talked to him, he's like, "Venías blanca, like you were
Wow.
pale." And he said, "What's going on?" And so I just broke down. I told my uncle, "Look, I'm struggling, and this is what's going on." And he shared with me his personal story about becoming a single father and being shameful for that, things I never talked to my uncle about. And at the end of the night, my aunt comes back from church, and my uncle tells me, "Today your aunt left to church mad at me because I got home late from work y me dejó."
Wow.
And I still think about today. I'm like, what if I had knocked on that door and my uncle wasn't there? What would have been my reaction, my hopelessness, my desperation? I would have probably done it. And so I'm thankful to God that my uncle was there.
Yes.
And sometimes we can be there for that person. Sometimes it's just little seasons, right? That we need to get people from this place to this place. And I tell people all the time, you can be that bridge for help. And I feel like in that moment, my uncle was that bridge for me. He
Wow.
he didn't judge me. He opened up his home, and again, we just might need that reassurance here and there.
Yeah.
But that's one of the times that where God saved my life.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
so I'm
I'm
grateful
glad
I
that.
could share that today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you took that step, and sometimes we don't realize why certain things we do, but there's an intention behind all of
Yes.
that, and like you said, God allowed you to go around to take more time to think it
Yes.
over, and then from there,
Hmm.
look where you are today. So,
Yeah.
and now you're impacting lives, you're helping people, and you're
Hmm.
breaking chains to start new generations and stuff. So,
Yes.
I love that.
Yes. I think we sometimes we don't realize our potential, right? What we can do with our story. And so even my uncle, I'm sure that he felt shameful for sharing his story with other people. And in that day, that's the tool that I needed.
Right.
Someone to meet me where I was at.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
I want to touch on the beautiful pin that you provided to me. So hopefully
Yes.
they could get it on the camera somehow.
Yeah.
Familia y amigos.
Yes.
But I want you to speak onto this,
Yeah.
please, because I know you shared it, and there's family members near and dear to my heart that have it as well. So
Yeah. So when I created NHSPN, for me it was helping families change the narrative, right? So this pin is a semicolon. It means the artist or the person has decided to continue their life. Our story doesn't end there.
yeah,
And so it's something that I share with people that I work with, parents. Our stories don't end here, and that's a very impactful message when you can wake up every day and realize, like, I have an opportunity to make this better. So we with NHSPN we do awareness, a lot of community awareness of, the statistics and the mental health issues that happen within our community. But I think a lot of times we feel like what happened, that happened, and that's it. That's who I am. But to me, the semicolon is a reminder that we can change the narrative. We can keep going. I'm very passionate about education,
yes,
passionate about knowing, like I said, the signs and symptoms, but realizing that sometimes we've been functioning based on the little that we know, right?
yeah,
So our story can change and be different.
powerful, powerful.
Yeah.
Um, what else do you offer within your organization, in case anyone has maybe questions on what else you could help them in some way
Yeah.
somehow?
So we offer awareness. I go into businesses as well to talk about mental health in the workplace. I think that's very important because sometimes we see our coworkers more than we even see our families. So we do awareness within schools, community organizations, and workplaces. And then, like I said, the educational part is the most important for me. Is teaching parents. We give a certification of knowing the signs and symptoms and how to help in a crisis,
Okay.
for both overdose prevention and suicide prevention.
Okay.
We are the first organization in DuPage County to give Narcan in education, bilingual in both
Okay.
English and Spanish. That's a big stigma there. If I take a class to learn about Narcan, does that mean I'm enabling my son to use drugs? No, if they're using drugs to cope, be prepared for it. Just
Yeah.
like sex education, be prepared for it. So education is a huge part for me. I can't always be that support system for someone. So I tell parents, you learn about it. You know your son more than I do. So you're gonna be able to identify those signs. So we give a training for parents or adults 18 and over how to be that support system, whether it's a crisis or non-crisis. I think it's important to know that in the preventative world, you don't have to wait for that crisis. You can be checking in on people without letting it get to that point. So we do the certification. Right now, we've certified 185 people so far with this
Okay.
training. They're mental health first aiders, so kind of like mental health. I mean, first aid, but for mental health, for your brain.
Okay.
That's what it is. Ultimately, creating people within our community that could be that support system, that bridge to professional help. What I'm doing also is I've been creating a network of professionals that are culturally inclusive. And also that I have gotten great feedback about their service, so that when someone comes to me and is looking for a therapist or a clinician, I have a resource pool of people I trust.
Okay.
Like I said, even working in the ER, I noticed how people didn't trust the system anymore. I mean, you say you want to take your life, you're gonna be taken in an ambulance or by the cops. They take all of your belongings. You're in a room, a white room that you can't have anything in there. So it's very traumatic. You
Yes.
leave the ER, and is there a follow up? Do you feel comfortable with your therapist? A lot of young people, they don't speak Spanish anymore, but their parents don't speak English. So finding the right professionals that can support family members in that way that speak Spanish and know the culture. So we've been creating a professional network of people that I can refer these people out to, because our we're not a crisis call center, but we do get a lot of crisis calls of people desperately looking for a provider that speaks Spanish,
Okay.
someone that the parents can understand. Because I feel like that's what happens a lot in the follow up. If the parent or the child don't feel comfortable with the professional, they're not going to do the follow up. And
Okay.
so it's important to be able to feel comfortable with the providers or the doctors you work with. So, like I said, awareness, education, and having that professional network of people to support the Hispanic community.
Okay. Now I know that you're locally here in Elgin,
Hmm.
but if someone reaches out to you from another state or somewhere else, is there still help through your nonprofit, or how
Not
does that kind of work?
necessarily through our nonprofit. I do hold some groups right now, restarting, that are virtual.
Okay.
Actually, during the pandemic, when I started the grief support group at Sherman, when the hospital, they said you guys can't meet in person anymore. So I tried to transition that group virtually. But I mean, it was new. You're talking about suicide loss. I could understand how people didn't trust Zoom and stuff. So we evolved into a support group that we had about 27 people meet, and a lot of them were out of state.
Okay.
So I have resources with other organizations outside of Illinois, but
Okay.
really ultimately is just leading people to understand that they have services within their community that are going to be better for them. Sometimes I've sat with parents just to call the insurance, just to be like, what services do you have? They don't even understand their insurance benefits. So I
I
think
could see that. Yeah.
yeah, I think that starting with what your insurance offers, start with what your school offers. If you're trying to help your child, schools have social workers. Teachers and schools are willing to help and be there for you. But again, it's breaking that barrier of comfort, the comfort level of saying, hey, our family's struggling with this. How can we get some support? But we do have a website, nhspn.org,
Okay.
where people can see locally our next events, our trainings. But I do hope to put a little bit more work in there, possibly add some videos of educational videos. I just did one with the American Academy of Pediatrics. It was a guide for suicide prevention for parents. So, I'm trying to collaborate with organizations that could spread the message. But I do believe that right now, what I've noticed in the work that I'm doing is it's just breaking the conversation,
Okay.
allowing people to feel comfortable to talk about this topic, because we don't
No.
want to talk about it a lot.
No, you're absolutely right about that. That's for
Yes.
sure. So, and this is
Big
why
taboo.
I had to have you here. I'm like, you know
Thank
what?
you.
New year, 2025, January, we got to get this out there. And I know you even share with me that there's a specific season. You said not many people have this mindset that when it's cold outside and gloomy, this is when the suicide rate is higher, but
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the case. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not the case. March, it begins in March when the highest rates of suicides begin. The numbers triple through
Wow.
July, September. That's when they start decreasing. But yeah, it's an awareness piece that even when I found out, I was like, wow, I would have thought it's in the holidays. But if you think about it, apart from the scientific part of it, of there's a higher inflammation in the body in the spring, so if you are dealing with high inflammation, I mean, your brain, depression, a lot of things that you're probably dealing with just get worse. But people during the holidays, they're busy. They're with their loved ones. Christmas shopping, New Year's, like Thanksgiving, all of that kind of starts going down. January,
Mm,
February, everybody's kind of in their home, especially in Chicago. I mean, it's cold. Nobody's trying to go anywhere.
right.
But yeah, you're in your home. You're not connecting with people enough, so you don't get to see those signs. But yeah, that March, it's like check in with people.
Okay.
It is, interestingly enough, it's the spring when things are blooming and coming back to life, but it's when people start taking their lives more.
I appreciate you sharing that, because that's one
Yeah,
thing I'm going to take into consideration, especially
yeah.
more so now going into that spring season.
Hmm.
Can you share a little bit more on your art studio?
Yeah, so Poema is a small space in downtown Elgin. We do painting events that help people express what they're feeling. There's a signature art program called I Am Poema. It's a stencil of a butterfly, and we paint it as I'm sharing different parts of my story. As of recently, I became a vendor for U46,
Okay.
working with Dream Academy. They did a field trip to Poema. They
Okay.
came into the studio. The youth get to paint. I get to share my awareness and my story in a more softer way. And so I've been doing that with the painting. It's a great way for people to feel comfortable with expressing. So we do that. I also lead a community drum circle.
Okay.
I started going into a school to help with their fifth and sixth grade students, bringing in the drumming. I mean, scientifically, it's been proven that drumming helps to rewire your brain. The mother's heartbeat is the first rhythm that we hear, so it's very
Mm.
soothing. So I
Okay.
bring the drum circle around. I'm actually next month I start working with Family Services Association of Elgin. I'm doing drumming with their clients. So I got to bring in a talent that God had given me into this scope of work, and that's one of my favorite things to do. So we do the drumming, we do the art, and then obviously the studio is a space for our trainings.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
just a little comfortable, safe space. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable talking about these things,
Yes.
in different spaces. But we're downstairs in the basement. There isn't a sign about, NHSPN or suicide prevention. It's a very neutral space, and people love the way it feels comfortable. And so
Okay.
I thank God for His blessing to have this space, because before I used to just meet with people at Starbucks or wherever we could meet, but
Yeah.
people couldn't cry comfortably. So I have
Yes.
this like little space downstairs that has just been such a key point for me to have a safe space for others. So we're trying to again expand the amount of people that get certified and trained, so that there could be like other Gabbies, doing this
Yes.
work in their own community.
Powerful. Powerful.
Yeah.
Well, Gabby, it's been a real blessing having you here. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
everything you shared.
Thank you.
If there's anything that I haven't asked and you want to share, please take this moment to
Yeah.
share. Before we end the show, we definitely want to have you share once again how they could get in contact with you. I know you
Yeah.
shared your website, but if
Yeah.
there's a phone number as well you want to provide or any social media platform,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
I was thinking of a statistic that I commonly share, and impacted me because I have two sons. I'm a first generation immigrant, but third generation immigrants are three times more likely to take their life than a first generation immigrant.
really, I
So
didn't
that
know that.
means not me, not my children, but their children are going to struggle with this more. So when I heard that, I was like, wow. So, like, we got to be more aware, right? And so that is a statistic I kind of want to leave for people that are, can share my story about, what my dad used to say to us all the time. Ustedes que pueden, what are you guys dealing with that is hard? I dealt with the hard. You know the language. You got your papers now. Like, you have nothing to worry about. And I think that's what happens a lot. We questions people's ability to be strong just based on our story. So yeah, leaving that statistic of, our younger generation needs support. They need
Right.
us to look at them without judgment. And so that's one, because I'm an immigrant, and I always think that it's important to realize that our that our kids can struggle too, even though we feel like we've done the hard work. But yeah, thank you for letting me share my story, Jason. I mean, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I'm sure we could talk more about this
Yes.
topic.
What's coming to mind to me is that we definitely have to do another one,
Sure,
and maybe we
yes.
could revisit this next year at some point. But we can.
Yeah.
It's a topic for me that's near and dear to my heart because I definitely want to be able to help inspire and empower many out there. And the last thing I want is anyone to take their life because each
Yes.
person here serves a
Yes.
purpose. They're meant
Exactly.
to stay here. They're not meant to go. When the time is your time, allow God to make that decision.
Exactly.
Don't you be the one to take your life because you
Yes.
serve a purpose,
You
and
serve a
I want
purpose.
them to be able to find other ways to seek the help to be able to
Mm-hmm.
escape, and maybe if they're local, connect with you, go to
Yeah.
your art studio, and
Mm-hmm.
just create that new masterpiece.
Yeah. And if they're not local, or I mean, even if they are local, there's a great number. It's the 988 number. You can text that number, you can call that number 24/7,
Okay.
and you will get a professional counselor to support you in that crisis call. people that are struggling with suicide or just any emotional crisis can call or text this number. They have a lot of languages and support. So I tell people all the time, hey, I can't make a promise that I'm going to be able to take your call or be there for you 24/7 because we do like to make that promise. Oh, call me whenever. I will be there for you. But life gets busy. We can't be that.
Right.
So I literally make people save that 988 number on their phone. So if you're struggling and I'm not available, call and text that number. So the
Simply
988,
988.
yeah, you can call it or text it
Okay.
and get support. Even as a parent, hey, I'm supporting my daughter. I don't know what to do. You, as a person that is supporting, can text and call that number. Yes, so the website is nhspn.org. You know, it's like ESPN, take out the E at the NH
Love
if
it.
it helps.
All right.
Again, thank you for making this topic an important topic in the beginning of the year and for allowing God to use your story and
Thank
allowing
you.
me to share my story with the community.
Amen. So, Gabby, if there was just one last final thing you want to leave with our audience
Yeah.
that you just want to share, again, teachable moments. I believe you've taught a lot today. But
Thank
with
you.
that, what's one last thing that you'd like to share with our viewers that they could take away?
Yeah, I would tell the viewers, your story isn't over yet.
Excellent. You heard it directly from Gabby, Familia
Yeah.
Amigos. So keep fighting, keep pushing. Don't limit your identity. You serve a purpose. Your story's not over yet. Well, I know the next step for me is I want to visit your studio. I want to come
Yes.
out and
Yeah.
see where you're changing lives and helping people. So
Thank
I
you so
definitely want to be
much.
there. Thank you again, Gabby.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Once again, familia amigos, I hope you found this interview resourceful and helpful. I know I did. So with that, make sure that you visit our website, www.don'tlimityouridenty.com. If you feel led and you want to go ahead and donate, please do. And if you like this video, please share, like, and comment with many out there. Take care. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.